Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this webinar. I'd like to welcome you all to today's discussion. We'll be discussing a very interesting topic. First and foremost, my name is Florence Otieno. I am the project lawyer at the Center for Rights, Education and Awareness. The Center for Rights, Education and Awareness is a feminist organization. We work towards a just and free society in which women and men exercise and enjoy their equal rights and responsibilities. We'd also like to thank all our development partners who made this webinar possible. I'd like to introduce our panelists for today as we wait for people to join in. And in no particular, I'll ask the panelists to put on their cameras, please, as I introduce them, and in no particular order. First and foremost, Mr. Onyango Otieno. I know many of you know him as Rix the poet. It's exciting to have you here today. Thank you for joining us, Rix. Mr. Onyango Otieno is he's a certified trauma coach. He's a strategical digital advocate trainer. Sorry, I got that wrong. He's a strategic digital advocate trainer, a mental health advocate, a podcaster, and a writer and a poet. Thank you so much, Rix, for being here with us today. I don't know if we can hear you. Say hi to your audience.
Hi, Florence. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm very much excited to be here and to share insights on the topic at hand today. Glad to be among very, very able panelists as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Elsie Mulimu. Elsie Mulimu is the project officer at CREW. She handles the Access to Justice program. She's also an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. Thank you, Elsie. Can say hi.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Elsie. We also have with us Edith Nyatigo. Edith, we can't see you. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Edith. Edith is a graduate of the Kenyatta University School of Law. She's currently a student at the Kenya School of Law. Hi, Edith. We can't hear you. Can unmute your mic, please?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, thank you, Florence, and welcome everyone. And I'm hoping that we will have really fruitful deliberations today.
Thank you, Edith. And last but definitely not the least, we have with us Balin Mora. Balin is also she's a graduate from the Kenyatta University. She's also a student at the Kenya School of Law. Hi, Balin.
Hi, Florence. Hi, everyone. So as you've heard, my name is Balin Mora, and I'm hoping that we'll get to engage and learn from each other at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Balin, for that. Thank you all for joining us. As more people log in, I think we can start the discussion. Today's topic, I think a lot of you have seen what we are trying to talk about. We're trying to talk about femicide and violence against women in higher learning institutions. So we've noticed that there's been an increase, particularly in higher learning institutions, and we thought we would bring the discussion to people who are actually in these higher learning institutions. So please feel free to engage with us on our social media pages. That's CREW Kenya. We Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. We also have a chat button, and I'm hoping to see a question and answer button and a chat button. I'm hoping to see more engagement. Feel free to join in the discussion with us. You can also raise your hand if you want to speak, and we'll give you that allowance. So straight to our topic today, femicide and violence against women in higher learning institutions. As the world grapples with the catastrophic effects of COVID-19 and its adverse effects on women, another pandemic is facing us: femicide and gender-based violence. It's brutally taking away the lives of young girls and women all over the world. Femicide has become prevalent in Kenya, especially with youth in higher learning institutions. There's therefore need to create awareness on what femicide is, how to prevent it. The youth need to be at the forefront in the fight against femicide. We need to create safe spaces for people to have these discussions and make it easier for the youth to speak out against it and encourage our peers to do the same. You can't downplay femicide. You cannot describe it as homicide. When this happens, we overlook the fact that there's a problem and it undermines the lives of people who are survivors of femicide. We therefore hope that the discussion today will be a huge stepping stone into ending femicide and other forms of GBV in Kenya, and particularly in higher learning institutions. So without further ado, I'll take us to our first panelist, Berlin. Berlin, could you please tell us what femicide is? I kindly explain to us what femicide is.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to use the definition that the European Institute of Gender Equality used. So according to them, they define femicide as the killing of women and girls because of their gender. Basically, women are killed because they're women. In summary, that was what they defined as femicide. Yes.
You've said women killed?
It was defined as women and girls being killed because of their gender. So I'm saying basically it's just women being killed because they're women. Yeah. Okay,
so we're saying that these are women being killed. Are there any types, different kinds of femicide, or is it just you're killed because you're a woman and then now we term it as femicide?
There's no types of femicide. Maybe I can say there are categories of femicide, in that there are two types of categories, that is intimate and non-intimate. So intimate is where a woman is killed by a person they know, maybe they were in a relationship with that person, so maybe they were close with that person. And non-intimate is when it's like a person you never had any relations with them, like it's a total stranger to you, perhaps. Yeah, those are the categories of femicide.
Thank you so much, Berlin, for that. So we've heard that there are two different, so intimate and non-intimate. So Otieno Onyango, or rather Onyango Otieno, how prevalent is femicide in Kenya? In Kenya, one, and in higher institutions?
You know, barely a day passes, to be honest, barely a day passes in this country before we hear that a woman has been murdered somewhere. And what gets to me actually is the fact that the stories that make it to the news do not really tell the full picture of what really happens on the ground. So we are a country of around 50 million people. And the stories of femicide that circulate in our counties, when you read county news, that's when these things really get to you. You know, we are a society that has normalized violence against women in a way that it is actually almost as essential as oxygen, you know. And so these stories are also now starting to proliferate in higher learning institutions to the point that, and the statistics show many times, if you measure the prevalence of violence meted upon men by women or people who identify as other genders, or lack thereof, and violence meted upon women by especially men, the discrepancies are too much to ignore. We cannot just say, this is something we can't talk about, you know? It's just, the numbers are too staggering in a way that we can't just ignore that, oh, you see, it's the women who are going to unsafe places. Oh, why are they dating this kind of boys? Oh, no, like it's too staggering to a point where this is actually supposed to be a national disaster. I remember a while back when this guy left Nairobi, and I think he went to, I think it was Moi University, if I'm not wrong, where he had a machete, traveled 5 hours from town. 5 hours. Yani ninatoka tao, naenda chuo kumadamse. Unajua, do you, like, what? You know, I can't rationalize it. So somebody leaves Nairobi and with a machete, travels in a public service vehicle, gets to campus with a machete, enters campus with a machete. They are not a student of that place. They go in public and injure somebody on their neck, cut them, and kill them. And life just goes on. What? The country does not stop. What? You know, so that level of disrespect to girls and women, and you know, the conversation around men are also men being violent to other men is something else for another day, but they are connected, right? But it also comes from the fact that our socialization, being a patriarchal country, a patriarchal world, a patriarchal continent, our socialization of who women are or who women are supposed to be is part of the huge problem we are grappling with today. So the prevalence is insane.
Wow, yeah, I think that's true. And talking about the guy who traveled 5 hours just to kill someone, you can imagine what was going through his mind. And that brings me to the second question, still to you, Mr. Otieno. Is there a link between the mental health and particularly now of the perpetrators and the increase in the number, and particularly now this year during the COVID period? I mean, since COVID was announced in 2022 now, is there a link to mental health and femicide?
Yes and no to me. Yes and no. Because yes, in the sense that people have really been stressed up. Relationships are stress factors to many young people, to many young families. And the way we express our stress, our anger, our dissatisfaction, our disappointment, most times is through violence. Now, that mostly has been associated with masculinity. Like, it's almost like violence has been synonymous to masculinity. So yes, there is a mental health link in that perspective, in that there is stress in relationships, and the way we young people or people in relationships and people in families who are married express their anger towards each other, many times, especially from the men's side, is through violence. So the link is through the stress, sometimes it's through unresolved traumas, sometimes it's also through the spur of the moment, you know, because sometimes, you know, you're arguing with somebody and then boom, you stab them, okay? Yes, there is a mental health link, but majority of the stories are really a matter of culturalization and socialization and conditioning. They are not mental health issues, you know? It is that thing of, mimi dem hizi ni show kitu, women belong to their place, my woman cannot tell me ABCD, you know? I will show her who I am. I will show her who the man is. You get? So a lot of it is not coming from mental health issues. A lot of it is coming from a socialization issue. And because socialization issues become structural issues, right? Which depict distribution of resources, distribution of education and empowerment and all these kind of things. So already if a guy is conditioned to think a woman is lesser than them, a girl is lesser than them, they are in a higher position to be violent against a woman. And this is something they've learned all their lives. So it is not a mistake. It is not a miracle. It's not at the news why we are where we are. No, we were taught to be this way. Boys were taught to be this way. This is what they see every day in the news. You imagine every day when you're young, when we were young, anytime you were watching TV, a president took the shape of a man. When you came back home, the head of the house took the shape of a man. When you went to church, we are 82% Christian in this country. The priest took the shape of a man. There were men everywhere. Men, it was the headmaster. By the time you were meeting a headmistress, it was like very, very rare. So the symbols of authority are men. Now, stories of violence. Anytime you get to the news, it's a guy who has hurt some guy somewhere. It's a guy who has raped a chicken. It's a guy who has raped a girl. It's a guy who has raped a goat. I don't know, like just things, man. to be honest with you, me, I've never heard stories of women taking animals and doing things with them. I've never heard of that. But guys are just all over the place. It's guys, when post-election violence is happening, for example, or riots, that energy of violence, 90% to 95% of the people in the street throwing stones, raping, carrying machetes are men, you know? So it is a socialization issue, and it's the thing that we've not been taught to take care of our uncomfortable emotions, again, because the people who are there caregiving for us, showing us direction, were also violent people. And so there's that thing called intergenerational trauma. You just keep passing it on. You don't even question, why am I the way I am? So when, for example, religion also tells you this is what a man is supposed to be and you're above everything and everybody, oh man, if God for the purpose of this conversation, if God himself takes the shape of a man and God created the world, we are doomed. I won't lie to you. We are doomed, because every symbol of authority a man feels that is their birthright. That's a very dangerous place to be as a society. So.
Wow, thank you so much. I'll get back to you because there's so much we still need to unpack in that conversation. But you brought up the issue about media and their coverage of these issues and how they are actually part of the problem. So Edith, I don't know if you're still on with us, but I'd like you to talk about how has Kenyan media really covered this issue of femicide?
That's a very good question, Florence. I'd like to first start by quoting Malcolm X on the media. Malcolm X said, "The media is the most powerful entity on earth. They have the power to make the innocent guilty and the guilty innocent." That's power, because they control the minds of the masses. I quoted Malcolm X because I just wanted to put into context how powerful the media is. They have so much power in shaping narratives, be it political, be it social, and specifically now to the issue of femicide. The media's depiction of femicide in Kenya has been very problematic. After any incident of femicide, most of us can attest that the media is always bubbling and awash with theories of what happened. And in most instances, the theories might not be true. And I'll give an example of the case of Ivy Wangeshi that Otieno already mentioned. When she was murdered, there were so many theories. I remember some media houses were saying the man killed her because she'd infected him with AIDS, and that wasn't true. The family that was grieving actually had to come out and say that she was not HIV positive, so there's no way that she could have infected him. And also the central point of this media coverage is usually characterized by victim blaming and victim shaming. You'll find media houses discussing, maybe this girl was drunk, this guy was at this and this joint, she was dressed like this. And when they do this, they shift the narrative from the heinous act that has been committed against the victim to maybe the part that the victim played in that act, or maybe how they deserved it. For example, also, I'll still stick with the story of Ivy Wangeshi. The Daily Nation is a leading newspaper, we all know it. It's very regrettable how they covered the story because the headline was Ivy Wangeshi's killer, a quiet worker and a teetotaler. And from this, we can see that the media is trying to humanize this person. And in so doing, they're shifting the narrative away from the victim that has been murdered. They're not creating awareness on how femicide is bad. They're actually trying to humanize this person. Another media house, Standard Media, still on the story of Ivy, the title was "Why I Murdered Ivy Wangeshi." And rationally speaking, when you look at this, it's like we're trying to justify, we're giving the perpetrator a platform to actually speak out instead of actually bringing justice to the victim. I'll still give another example on just to see how the media covers. You remember Sharon Otieno's murder? It happened some time back. Sharon Otieno is the girl that was allegedly murdered by Okoth Obado. In that story, what the narrative that the media was putting in place was that this girl was a slay queen, she was with a powerful man, and probably for financial reasons, in so doing, they were trying to warn young women not to enter into transactional relationships. And this was actually victim blaming. They did not tell us that it's actually everyone's responsibility. The perpetrator, in as much as I've entered a relationship with you, you do not have a right to kill me. It does not matter. And that's how the media has sensationalized the issue of femicide. And just looking at another spectrum, when the media is not sensationalizing or giving out different narratives, they are ignoring these stories. For instance, when I mentioned the name Carol Ngumbu, how many of us know that name? I'm sure not so many of us. That was the young girl. She was 21 years old that was killed alongside Chris Nsando. During that time, I'm sure many of us can remember the public outcry that people were speaking up against the assassination of Chris, but not so many people were talking about Carol. The only time the media was talking about Carol was asking why she was with this powerful man. They were not addressing the wrongful acts that had been committed to her. And also in contrast, the media usually grants perpetrators a detailed coverage. They want to know who they were beyond their heinous acts. This is the example I've given of how the media covered the perpetrator, the person who killed Ivy Wangeshi, and how you remember them covering how Obado was adopting in prison, whether he's been granted bail. They were not addressing the root of the issue. In wrapping up on this issue, I'd just like to state that the media has a very central role in shaping how society views the issues it covers. Therefore, when we cover these issues carelessly and in a mocking manner, it encourages Kenyans to look at these matters with mockery. Therefore, the media should take the opportunity they have to talk about the unequal power relations and the patriarchy and misogyny instead of sensationalizing these cases.
Wow, thank you, Edith, for that. I think that was quite important. There's a lot, the discussion around how the media and the role the media has played. Thank you so much for that powerful quote from Malcolm X. Now, I want to bring in Elsie into the conversation because we'll still unpack, and I can see, thank you so much for engaging with us on the chat section. Please feel free to ask questions, engage with us on our social media pages. We're happy to have the discussion with you guys. As this goes on, Elsie, could you please tell us, is femicide preventable? Is there anything we can do to prevent femicide?
Yeah, I mean, I think looking at, femicide and just listening to what the other panelists have said, unfortunately, femicide is fatal. And in this instance, I'm going to refer to them as victims and not survivors. Because yes, it actually results in death, and it is preventable. One, because before they bite, they bark. There are usually so many symptoms or rather signs of these eventualities happening. I think in preventing, there needs to be a lot of talks, a lot of conversation, open, honest, and I'd say very conscious conversations, not one-sided, especially those perpetrated by the media, in a way to victim blame, to shame, and to really just put a stain on who we call survivors or the victims, depending on how it ends. Because often by the time, these scenarios get out, it's fatal. But I can tell you, gender-based violence is happening every day. And the ones we hear about are often attached to the names that have been mentioned, but it's happening every day. It's happening in especially the most vulnerable, the most vulnerable locations around the country. Just to speak to, is it preventable? It is, again, those conversations, but most of this conversation is actually to be engaged with men. I think I was following Onyango when he was talking about, patriarchy and what has been ingrained in men and what they've seen, growing up. We have to move away from those social norms and realize that women's rights are human rights. You cannot begin to say that, women are in or at any point, subpar or subordinate, or that their lives that don't matter. Because if you actually look at, femicide, it really stems, femicide and GBV in general, it stems from a point of power. really violence is asserting power. And you can see that it cuts across the way Onyango was speaking about post-election violence. I mean, you get an opportunity, you want to meet your anger, it's a woman, okay? And looking at just what Berlin was talking about, how would you decide? How would you define, femicide? Ideally, it's a larger conversation. Unfortunately, it's fatal around GBV, but it's basically exerting power, particularly to someone, just because they're women. And so we need to have these conversations, and these conversations need to be steered away from victim blaming. I mean, I think we all saw the post by the cooperative university. That is very misleading, because then how do you justify, a man beating his wife at home? Is it because she, she dressed in a certain manner? We have instances of men raping shows. We have instances of men raping young girls, defiling, sodomizing young boys. How then do we say that, this is about how the victim behaved, or how they dressed, or where they were, or that they were drunk? So I think it's important to have those conversations. But also, one way to prevent would be, I could hear what Edith was saying about the headlines. I really liked the situation with the radio station. I think it was earlier this year. And I really commend CCK, the Communications Authority of Kenya, for just, giving those sanctions. But what I liked best wasn't necessarily the sanctions and punishment, but also the recommendations that they gave, that those staff be sensitized. And they also gave a breakdown of what was wrong with that. And so ideally, I think we need to have, not just, consequences and whatnot. Of course, that served as an example, but for people to understand that we cannot excuse GBV, and we will not keep saying that is, it's because of such and such is when someone was raped. But also, ideally, we need to have a lot of talks around mental health. I think it's important that, people are able to, one, be able to know when to say, okay, this is clearly not working. I need to, because it's as easy as, moving away from that particular situation. We never get to femicide. Again, femicide is very fatal. Can we seek out, mental health expertise to be able to get that? Can we explore that? And if not, that it is indeed okay to move on. But again, a lot of social norms, patriarchy, I think we need to really engage men, because I think a lot of what is happening now around, even around the youth would be, and I think Onyango will probably highlight this, how there's an issue with rejection, dealing with someone not, and again, that stems from power and patriarchy. But how do men respond when they're given no for an answer? Is it that they're so used to hearing yes? Is it something they saw at home? So I think for us to prevent this, we need to have really a large scale conversation, and normalize such conversations. And this should be engaged, and particularly men should be engaged and be part of these conversations.
Thank you, Elsie, so much for the insightful comments. Something stood out with me. You said they bark before they bite. I'm taking the conversation back to Mr. Otieno. There's a question in the chat box, and I'll paraphrase it. So the question is, just as other forms of violence against women, there are early tell signs that, what are the signs that someone could be a victim, or what should someone watch out in a relationship? Is it the first time my boyfriend chokes me, particularly because now our conversation is among people in higher learning institutions? Are there any red flags, any warning signs, anything earlier on that could tell me, oh my God, I'll probably end up dead in this relationship, or I'll end up dead in this situation? I don't know if you can hear me. Okay, so maybe I can pose that question. I'll ask it as time goes by. So I think I'll take us back to a different side of the conversation. Edith, he's back. Okay, wait, I can see Mr. Otieno, I don't know. Yeah, thank you. So I was asking the question that was asked in the chat by Vincent Otieno, who was talking about just like other forms of violence against women, are there any early telltale signs or red flags that the person will be mentally unstable and this could actually lead to violence or femicide?
Simple but question, but complex question actually, because while it is true that often there are red flags we often ignore, especially at the beginning of relationships, I think it is connected to our high wavelength or threshold of being used to violence. Our threshold for violence is so high, so much that when we see it with people we want to fall in love with, even in the tiny bits, we are like, yeah, you could be biased and I can live with this, you know. So that is one. The second one is sometimes people bombard you. There's something called love bombing, yeah? You meet somebody and they start telling you how much they love you. You've barely known them. They've barely known you. And that it is like so overdone. It is really overdone in a way that, and then when they can't find you on phone, they want to call you all the time. Like they are calling constantly. They want to know where are you? What are you doing? Are you in the toilet? Who are you with? What are you watching now? Are you bathing? Have you eaten? Like it's just like they're just there, they're on your face like that. That's not healthy. Guys, that's not how love is shown, please. Like it's not healthy at all. We know, yeah, like women love to be cared for and everything, but please, it doesn't work like that. And so when you start realizing that there is, first of all, an inconsistency in communication, and the other thing, it's an overdoing of certain things. Those are very early telltale signs of some kind of instability. And it does not necessarily mean it has to be mental. It could just be emotional. Many times it is emotional instability. And of course, emotional instabilities are connected to mental health issues. I am very careful with trying to look at this issue as a mental illness conversation, because our mental health varies from time to time. Morning, evening, morning, night, all our mental health keeps varying with the day, the time, your experiences and everything. Mental illness is something totally different, okay? They could be connected, but they are not synonymous. So, when you're having emotional instability, it just means that you're having a hard time regulating your emotions. It doesn't mean that you have a mental illness, okay? It is a mental health issue, but you do not have mental illness, okay? It is a mental health issue in the sense that you do not have the skills to control your brain and your emotions in a way that will make the other person feel safe, okay? You don't need medicine for that. A mental illness, you might need medicine for that, you get? So that is the thing. So we really just need to be a bit more on the lookout on and discussing these things early on in relationships. Discuss these things, as guys, we don't talk about stuff. Ni zile tu mahormones ziko hapo, you've seen somebody, they are cute, you look them, you're going to, you like all their Instagram photos from 2017, huko hivo, you're stalking them, now you're texting them all the time, they're texting back, boom, relationship, boom, sex, boom, we are doing this. And then 2 months down the line, the cracks start showing and you didn't start by talking about the important things that are supposed to be basic, like how do you deal with stress? Very simple question, but we don't ask each other that when relationships are starting because we're on such an adrenaline high, dopamine is, everything is high. Now our cognitive capabilities go completely down. How do you deal with stress? Ask somebody actually how their family background is, not necessarily to judge them from that, but how they perceive it. There are people who say, my father used to beat up my mother, so my girlfriend can't tell me anything, you get? And there are people who say, Hey, me, my father was abusive to my mom. Hey, me, I can't do that stuff anymore. You get? So knowing somebody's background is not for you to judge them with it, but it's just to understand their perception of where they come from. Very important. All these things point down to emotional intelligence, which is something we are never taught at any point of our lives. And this is among the reasons we are really struggling with handling our emotions today.
Wow, personally, I'm like learning a lot. At the talking stage now, Lisa, how do you handle stress? Got it. Not your favorite color though. Like, yeah. So it's important to have these conversations right from the get-go. Berlin, given that you're in a higher learning institution, what factors, among the factors that you talked about, what really contributes to violence against women in higher learning institutions and femicide? We had the third year medical students killing each other. I mean, our friends went through med school and they weren't, the cases were not reported. Let me not say it was not happening. The cases were not reported. So what is contributing to the increase right now? Why should we be making noise about this?
Okay, for me, the factors that I feel like contribute to femicide, first of all, is the feeling of entitlement. Some men feel like they're entitled to a woman in that they're entitled to your body. Like, as women, we're supposed to be subject to them. Like, we come second, like their command, like the commanders, and along those lines. And this is why when certain men are rejected, because of the strong belief that they feel like they're the superior gender, like, as a woman, there's nothing you can tell me. Therefore, whatever I want from you, whatever I say to you, like, you have to bend to my rule in such a belief. So from this feeling of entitlement, they become violent. Some, they may be like physically violent, but some, it actually becomes worse to the point that it results to into a murder case, which now we term as femicide. That's why I've liked what Onyang has said. In the first date, I think it is important to understand, like, how do you handle conflict? Okay, I never thought of that, but I think it's important. I think there's, of course, we can discuss colors and everything, but discussing conflict resolution is very important, because this, as well as also women have this low expectation that he was good at the waiter. That's enough. Maybe he was good at the waiter at that time, but when you guys are arguing, it might actually turn violent. He's not the same person as he was to the waiter. And then these issues of dishonesty and unfaithfulness in the relationship. I can say, let me just say, like, okay, let's say if a woman is cheated on, she might be angry and all that, but I feel like men take it, maybe a man might take it really like, you cheated, how dare you, like, how dare you? So because of the feeling of, inferiority by males, they don't want to feel that, like, you're making me feel inferior by the fact that you've actually cheated and all that. So when a woman cheats, it's likely that she will be killed by her partner. Yes, both males and females might actually experience this. A woman might actually get really mad and kill a man. That's not like that actually happens. But women are more likely to be affected by such situations, like more likely to experience femicide, like being killed by their partners compared to men. Another factor is the factor of gender inequality. So if there are gaps in the society where there are clear inequalities for women, in that they don't have the opportunities offered to men, so women will not be empowered. So whenever they face GBV and other obstacles, they would have the power to, to reach out for help, to speak out, to walk out from bad relationship. Some women are there in bad relationship, not because they want to stay there, not because, they love the man. It's just that they don't have the power to live. They don't have the income to support themselves. Like, the man is the one who has been taking care of them. They have 5 kids. Where will that person go? But I'm talking still in higher learning institution, in that we see people moving in together. So some university students, maybe you meet a man, he's been paying for you your campus, your school fees and everything, and now you want to, how will you walk away from such a relationship? This man is like your breadwinner, if I may say so. So they have, like, if women are not empowered, they won't have the power to speak up. Also, Another contributing factor is the fact of the commodification of women, in that women are viewed as property. Women are taken like as some extent as commodities that could be, I can purchase you, like how much do you need me to pay you so that I can sleep with you, And then so when like a woman rejects you, let me say they reject you, or they don't want, or they're tired of the relationship. Some men may not take it nicely, so eventually the man will be like, I've been doing this, I've been taking you out on dates. They put a monetary value on your life, like you're worth this value, I've been doing this and this and this, so this is your value, so you owe me this. So from that, a man feels, it's not like, if he feels that it's not fair for him, like I did this and this to expect this, and I never did this for you to walk out of my life, I never did this for you to do A, B, and C. So it turns out to be a violent relationship, and eventually it turns out to be murder. There's so many other factors, such as the positions of women in the society. So in an ideal world, men do not want to be challenged. Some men do not, let me say some men, because other men do not have such problems. So some men do not want to be challenged, in that it's either their way or the highway. So when in a, let's say in a higher learning institutions, people have various beliefs, people are, let's say in a class discussion, people are fronting their ideas. So if a man feels this is a woman that, she's outspoken, she's strong-willed and all, some men might actually feel threatened to that. So if you're in a relationship with a woman who's strong-willed and you've never seen women, maybe you grew up in a setup where your mother was maybe subjective to your father, it was your father was the only one who was making decisions. So if your woman is trying to make decisions with you, you're not comfortable with it, you feel like she's strong-willed and all. So arguments start there. The next time it's maybe you slap her. It starts like maybe you slap her. Then you say, I'm sorry, I never repeat it. The next time it's a feast. The next time, maybe she's in a casket. So that's how it just ends up building up. Yeah.
Okay, wow, thank you so much for that. I think we've learned, I've now started to understand why it's prevalent in higher learning institutions. So there's a comment in the chat that talks about asking girls to have a situational awareness is good, but placing the responsibility on men is still crucial. So this brings us to the issue of victim blaming, victim shaming, and Edith. What is it in Kenyan society? How has this led to the silencing of victims?
First, I'll start by defining or just giving a general understanding of what victim blaming is. And victim blaming is rooted in the public belief that a victim is responsible for the violent act that has been meted out against them. And here, the blame is maybe partially or entirely shifted to the survivor. And it's very important to note that the perception that the survivor or maybe the victim is responsible for that action perpetuates a very dangerous narrative. This is because it's like we're saying the survivors or the victims are guilty or they have a part to play in whatever has happened to them. And we should take note that when discussing any matter of gender-based violence, the victim's mode of dressing, their sexuality, or maybe their sobriety should not be relevant. The perpetrator is the sole reason for the violence and should bear responsibility alone for it. But it's very regrettable in the society that we live in. The first thing that someone will ask when you hear that someone was raped or someone was killed is, especially rape, is what was she wearing? Was she drunk? Where was she? Was she walking out at night? And that's a very, very dangerous narrative. And with regard to this, I'd like to take you back to, it was in 2020, February, I think, when the University of Nairobi released a memo. And the memo was about the increased incidents of rape around the school. In that memo, actually, it's very surprising. It said that these students were being raped because of their recklessness. That's a classic case of a victim being blamed and being shamed. Just because I'm out at night or I'm dressed in a particular way, it doesn't give you a right to rape me or just mete out any violence against me. Because when we do so, we take away the agency from women. It's like we're giving excuses for these actions that are being done against women. And the culture of victim blaming has led to the silencing of victims. It's human instinct, actually. If, let's say, something wrong has happened to me, I've been raped, and when the last time I heard of someone being raped, I had the society judging them. I had the person being bashed because maybe she'd gone out to a party, or because maybe she'd gone out on a date with someone, and so the society is saying, you know what, you were raped because you did this and this, and that will make me actually just retreat to my shell and not want to come out and speak. And this is the same situation in the Shafi. I'm sure most of us are well aware of the Shafiweru controversy. We remember in that was also another case of victim blaming, because they were saying because this girl went out on a date with this guy, that it was actually they're actually trying to show that, you know what, it can be justified. And this has, like, these beliefs have really, they've permeated society, and it has made it really normal for you to blame the victim, and it has deterred so many women. Another incident is going to I've actually had so many first-hand stories of a girl who will say she went to the police station to report something that had happened to her, and the police will actually ask her, what were you wearing? Why were you there? And this is actually silencing women. And I'd just like to say, we're living in a society where women have started speaking out more. Women are taking their power. Women are shouting louder than the aggressor. And therefore, what we can do is actually provide these women with safe spaces where they can actually speak out about what has happened to them.
Okay, thank you so much, Edith. So Mr. Otieno, I'll pick one O. I think I have the two O's are confusing me. I'm like, am I talking the same person? So we want to talk about what's the attitude of Kenyans towards femicide and how these attitudes have led to the flourishing of GBV and femicide. And as you've talked, I want us to talk about also how we can change those attitudes, how we can shift those attitudes in society.
The attitudes are very open for us to see. Women are hated, man. Women are hated, man. That's a global issue. We hate women. It doesn't need an intellectual to see, because violence against women cuts across all classes. All classes. There is high data showing violence against women. If I would start with the media. Now, Edith is from explaining to us what reporting about femicide has been shown to us over the years. And I mean, as somebody who has been lucky to work with journalists, you see what you and I as Mwananchi watch on TV at 7 p.m. as news has gone through a very systemic process from the time the reporter is collecting the story to the time the story is being read by the newscast. But it is the news editors who decide which story is going up and how it's going to be said. And sorry to say that, again, our newsrooms are very misogynistic, you know? If you look at the people making decisions as to what stories are going up and how they are being told, it's still the men. It explains the misogyny in the reporting, right? It explains the misogyny in how can you write a headline, you're giving a platform to a murderer and they're saying, why I murdered Ivy. Do you know how crazy that is? How crazy that actually is, you know? The fact that somebody sat comfortably and we can say, fine, somebody can argue, but it is a business tactic. When I see this headline, I will want to buy the paper. But, and that is what it actually connects us to capitalism, because of how dehumanizing capitalism is, so much that you would rather give a murderer a platform for you to have a heavy pocket for yourself right? But you're dehumanizing somebody else, and you, without flinching, you know? So the attitudes are there, like they are so open. When we go back to our homes, anytime, even just in this, zile ploti tu tunaishi, when something happens between a family and a couple, yeah, and the husband is being violent to the guy, to the wife. These days, people even fear coming in between. You know, they don't come to help unless actually you're living in, like, you know, disadvantaged areas or slums, for lack of a better word, where the homes are just so together. In these middle class apartments, my friend, you die in there. Nobody comes to knock on your door to ask what's going on with you. People are dying. Women are dying in these homes. And, you know, I know every time this conversation comes, you know, the men on the timeline will like, even men. But we are just focusing on where the numbers lie at this moment. So many women we hate women. That is my headline of my newspaper today. We hate women. You know, those are the attitudes. How do we change that? We have to be honest about what led us there. You know, we have to be honest. And I know there are people who also say that there was no patriarchy before colonialists came. You know, it's not entirely true. Okay, a lot of those systems where women were more prominent, we have to go so far back, so far back. Yeah, but in most times, men were still the chiefs. You know, we talk about chiefdoms. They don't represent women. You know, we have to be honest about how we view culture. So many times when people say African culture, it is usually like some cobweb at the corner of a house which cannot change. It can't change. It is there forever. It cannot be removed, you know? But culture really is just a set of ideas that turn into agreements that people say, this is how we are going to live. But you see, the other thing we don't talk about culture is the people who set up the structures of culture are the people in power. So anytime we talk about culture, we have to also think who is in power in that culture. Those are the people. Every time tunaongeanga kuhusu wahenga, many of us envision wahenga as elders who are old men. We don't envision women, do we? No. The way the sayings will come out in our communities, we are envisioning it's men who are saying these things. We don't envision women talking about wisdom things and stuff. We don't. When you hear, like in my Luo community, there was a rule, there's a part of a chicken a woman can't eat if the husband is not there. So it's the firstborn son who has to eat it. In fact, it goes back, even there was a time where it was illegal to eat eggs for a woman. Yani wanaume, my boys, sisi, we are just in a palace every time, like, women can't eat eggs, wakule mboga tu, wakule tu mboga. Yani we want to have the finest things all the time. So that culture, our perception of culture, we have to start seeing culture as an evolving rhythm, you know? It's an evolving whatever idea, that it doesn't have to stick to what it was, because people are living in very different times in every generation. Culture also has to change, even just the way nature changes. Because I believe none of us who is here presently here today was born the way they were. Florence, you were born without teeth, man. Something changed. Something changed. Something moved, something grew, something changed within you, metamorphosized, grew, you know. So how is it that when it comes to culture, all of a sudden we want to remain with it like this, like that? And when you look at people who colonized us, they've changed a lot. In fact, it is only just 50 years ago that gay marriage was illegal in Europe. It's just 50 years ago. It's not a long time. It's 50 years ago. It was illegal. it's also them that they were saying interracial marriages are illegal. It's still them. But those things have since changed. Why do we want to stay the same? We want to stay in the trauma. It's because, first of all, we are also lacking what that identity really means to us, what that African identity, we don't know what it is right now. Again, because of things like lack of documentation, so much has been lost in between time, we don't know who we are. So we have this longing to have a sense of belonging for African culture. We don't know what African culture is. So we are clinging to an empty idea of what culture is in expense of safety today, in expense of people's lives today. And it's not anybody's fault, but we have to start thinking, are my ideas progressive to the safety of my spouse, to the safety of my girlfriend, to my own safety, because men are also in there in that mess, between themselves, amongst themselves, within themselves, right? So our attitude, we have to go back to the roots. Where are we? What informs how we see ourselves? Yeah, are these ideas coming from religion? Are they coming from what we've been taught is African culture? Where are these ideas coming from? And what can we change about it so that we can progress in the future with utmost respect to human dignity?
Wow, that was really powerful. I think it then begins with the conversation we're having and taking this conversation everywhere. I think I've learned so much. Thank you for that. I think we can take a question from the Q&A. I don't know, Elsie, I don't know if you can see the question and answer section, but Odonyo Wambura would like to know whose take on this vice? And I think you can just give the perspective, international organizations and what's happening in that space and in the political space in Kenya.
Sorry, Florence, just come again. I only got the last bit of your question. I think it's my network.
So Odonyo Wambura is asking, I would like to know what is the take of WHO on this vice? I believe that's World Health Organization. So just to broaden the discussion and just say what's happening in the international space, and then also nationally, is femicide considered a crime? Yeah, just give us, I don't really want to guide you, just tell us what's happening in that space.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Okay, I'll speak to what's happening here in Nairobi, actually in Kenya. So aspects of femicide, basically sexual and gender-based violence, are actually anchored in health, and they're anchored basically under the health functions of the counties. And so you have that directorate within the counties, but it's also important to note that there's a bigger calling one to place a lot of emphasis on, I'm not sure if this is the correct term, but on mental health, but a lot of this is on response, so this is post whatever incident that has taken place. But there's also a lot of calling right now to have, universal health coverage that, offers sort of comprehensive health care to survivors. So they're able to access, the medical aspect, but also key being that, mental health is also one of those. So for me, I feel like this is also quite preventative, because it's so expensive to be able to sit down with a counselor or a psychiatrist, and having that as part of the health coverage, enabling someone to heal. I think this is a way in which survivors' eyes can be opened, they can heal, and they can know that going back there is really not the solution, and therefore then preventing any other incident of GBV or femicide, for that matter, in the event of fatalities. So yeah, so there's that move for it to be, not just sort of like a women's rights issue as such, but women's rights are human rights. So access to health. We're also talking about mental health. And right now, that's the conversation that is happening nationally and even internationally. And, it's something that we are keen on seeing through as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Elsie. Thank you for all the questions. Please keep them coming. Keep engaging with us on our social media pages and also here in the chat. I'm seeing a discussion on alcohol. Berlin. I think it's important to now bring it to the higher learning institutions and talk about, I'm seeing what role does alcohol play in the conversation. I'm trying to get the question. So from Wayusia Audrey, how do you explain the connection between drug abuse and GBV in higher learning institutions? And how can, okay, so I think we've addressed the victim shaming part. So let's talk about drinking, alcohol, drugs, drug abuse in higher learning institutions and how it contributes to femicide and gender-based violence.
Thank you for that question. So substance abuse, I don't want to say it's very common, but university students to go for their parties. We can't forget that, there are some people who use, weed? Let me say weed. So substance abuse is it's normalized, especially in parties and all that. So where there's substance abuse, obviously, a person's judgment is definitely clouded. So you can't, if someone is intoxicated, you can't say you'll have a civilized conversation with them. So even if you're trying to address an issue when they're intoxicated, definitely it will go from 0 to 100 very fast, very, very fast. So so let's say if it's a couple that they're both in university. So maybe the lady is trying to address something with the man, but the man is already intoxicated. So the man can feel, you're trying, maybe his alcohol is telling him, I'm a man, what are you trying to say? What, all that. So it ends up like he's beating the girl. So that will be the first time. And then, also still in higher learning institutions, there are those who they don't maybe take the alcohol and the drugs, and maybe occasionally, maybe during the parties and all. It's a daily basis for them. So it's part of their routine. Maybe they can't function, maybe it has reached the point that it's an addiction stage. So maybe they can't function without the alcohol. So being in a relationship with such a person, that person will be very abusive towards you. So if already the relationship was hard, the drugs and all that, they take the situation to a very worse place. So the first time, maybe if it's your friend and they're in such a relationship, the first time maybe you'll see maybe she was slapped, maybe a small injury. So maybe the next time she's putting on makeup to hide the scar and all that. You try to talk to her, you tell her, of course, they always know the guy is bad for her, you're going to preach all the gospel you have, but it's up to her to decide. But the problem is, apart from talking to her, what else can you do? That's the problem. People don't know what else to do. You can't go to the police station and say, my friend is in an abusive relationship, come and help her. Policemen are actually more likely to to laugh it off. Those are not things we are dealing with more serious issues than such things. So so campus students do not know how to address such issues. So at the end, your friend may actually end up in a casket where you're just there trying to talk her out of that relationship, because you can't help. It's not easy for campus students, to take such conversations with their parents. We can also see that compared to high school and in campus, people are not that close with their teachers, with the lecturers as they were in high school. So you can't go to a lecturer and say, this is going on. You can't address it with the school. There's no forum to address GBV, because people assume in campuses the relationships are not that serious, so we can't be experiencing GBV in such a stage. So if it's a bad relationship as a woman, as two people, since you're adults, you're just expected to walk away. But now it's a relationship that it's already bad, and then there's substance abuse on top of it. Even though you try to talk to people out of it, they won't listen. And as Onyang had stated, nowadays people just, they don't, even if you see two people fighting, you just, it's none of my business. It's like, not my monkey, not my circus, it's not my problem. So even if you see, even if like you pass and see a woman being beaten by a man, you might be just ignoring it, that's their own problem. Because, let's say if individually as let's say I'm passing somewhere and I see a couple fighting and the woman is really being beaten, I'll be afraid to step in, because this man obviously has the strength to actually beat the both of us. So what do I do in such a situation? In an ideal world, of course, I need to go and seek help and all that. But if it's an isolated place where there are no other people, what else can I do? But before it actually reaches a point that we have to drag people out of such situation, I think it's therefore important to have safe environments for people to actually discuss GBV. If also in higher learning institutions, approaching that actually this is what you're going through, you're afraid what people will say. That's the other issue. So even though later the person you're with uses drugs and everything, by the time people are finding out, maybe it's too late. They never knew the situation was that bad. So at the end of it all, I feel that substance abuse actually makes the situation worse. And that's why I feel it's very important that we have such conversation to encourage people that there is no shame in talking about GBV. And as Edith had mentioned about victim blaming, all that is what is making people not to speak out. Yeah, that's what I can say for that for now. Florence.
Thank you so much, Bailin, for that. I think I'll still take the conversation back to you, though you've talked a lot, but we've talked, we're now in the 16 days of activism. So can you just tell us what that is and why it's important to have this conversation right now?
16 days of activism. It's an international campaign to challenge the violence against women and girls. So the campaign usually begins from the 25th of November, which is the day, 25th of November is usually the day for elimination of violence against women, to the 10th of December, which is the Human Rights Day. So through during this process, it's more of creating awareness. That's why we're having such a webinar right now, mainly focused to try to reach out to the youth. So during this period, it's trying to raise awareness, because I'm so sure even right now, there's some people who are not aware of the fact that there's a term such as femicide. As Edith had mentioned earlier, when the media sometimes are portraying out, like giving out the news, even when they're writing articles, they don't term the when a woman is killed, they don't use the term femicide often as it should. So not many people are aware of femicide. So they may just generalize these aspects as homicide. So the purpose of the 16 days of activism is to have these various talks. What is GBV? What are the different forms of GBV? To try and put more emphasis that GBV is not actually only physical. It doesn't have to be like a person has been, really beaten up, that they're hospitalized, that it actually becomes GBV. GBV can be financial constraints, it can be emotional torture, the fact that maybe a person is, maybe just verbally abusive, just destroying you emotionally, that's still GBV. So during the 16 days of activism, it's trying to create awareness around all these aspects of GBV, so that people can realize that actually, maybe they're in a situation and they don't know they're actually experiencing GBV, and they can actually speak out. It also brings out the aspects of making people aware of the different places they can actually go and report such cases, where they can seek help. It's a time for organizations such as CREW to come up and make people aware of such organization that can actually help them. And there's no need to actually suffer in silence, because a lot of people suffer in silence. Yes, GBV, of course, is not specifically affecting women alone. It also affects men, but in reality, women suffer more compared to men. Like that's unfortunate. We don't dispute that men also suffer GBV, but the reality is that more women suffer GBV, and women, and also another reality is that it's women and children, unfortunately. Because when the mother is suffering, also the children are suffering, because the children are seeing maybe, the way the father is beating the mother, and they grew up And the same children might actually grow up with the same behaviors as their father, unfortunately, and the cycle will continue. So there will never be an end to GBV. So 16 days of activism, it's trying to create the awareness about GBV, how can we report, where can we go, safe havens and all. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Balin, for breaking down for us exactly what 16 days of activism is and why it's important to have this discussion. So back to Mr. Onyango. I just want to know, on an individual level and as institutions, what can we do to end GBV and what can we do to end femicide?
Oh man, I'll try to shorten my answer. That answer is actually, that answer needs a whole lecture, by the way. One thing is to re-strategize our socialization of gender relations. Very important from childhood. How do we talk to girls? How do we talk to boys about each other? About girls and about boys? How do they see each other? Do they start seeing, like those times when we were playing Kalongolongo, gender roles were already starting to be defined from that age. I was sitting there watching the TV, my legs crossed, my woman there, my wife is cooking, So gender roles start being, like they start being standardized from such a young age. And that is, as a society, we have to, I know we are so pegged on, everybody has their role in the society, women have their roles, men have their roles. Real life is very complex. Real life is way much more complex than that. We can't just live as if everything is that simplified. So yeah, that is one. The second one will be taking personal initiative. And of course, I know every human being is a product of the society they come from. And so your worldviews are shaped by the society you come from. But we are getting to a point where there is access to information. You have to educate yourself on how you're going to take charge of your life. And this is on all areas of your life, including your relationships, including your relationships with other people of different genders or lack thereof. On an institutional level, we are really behind time in setting up structures in our institutions and parastatals and religions, all these kind of institutions, setting them up in a way that is gender sensitive, catering to the needs of employees and partners and persons living with disabilities and all these people, whether they are men or women or lack thereof. We have to start setting up gender sensitive structures in our programs. A day like today, it would have been great, for example, if we had a sign language interpreter, because there's somebody who wants to join this conversation, but they can't hear, and they want to be part of this because they are also part of society, and these issues affect them because they either identify as men or women or intersex or something else. But we've not included them, for example. So thinking of inclusivity in our systems is one sure way of tackling these issues, because it would in turn ensure that codependency and overdependency issues are looked into, on top of working on the attitudes that we have over each other. I think one other issue, and somebody pointed it out, like, you move in with your husband, your lady, he's providing everything. On the day you guys have conflict, he reminds you that you're not contributing any money to the space. So when we create gender sensitive systems in our workplaces, in our schools and everywhere, these issues will start being combated. you know. So that's what I'd say around that.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I think it's important to actually leave this conversation knowing what I can do and what we as institutions can do to actually end this vice. Edith, we've talked about the media, the role the media play. Is there anything that the media can do to prevent femicide, to prevent GBV? What role does the media play, not only after the act, but before? What preventative role can they play?
That's a very good question, Florence. As we've already said, I've said this severally about the central role of media in just any narrative in society. So like, because of the huge platform that they have, they can actually play a huge role in preventing femicide. One of the things that the media can do to prevent femicide is by giving an accurate representation of the problem. As Berlin had earlier stated, the media usually do not portray femicide as just femicide. They maybe portray it as a normal homicide or an isolated incident. A research that was actually done in 2019 actually showed that the research sampled 78 articles that were speaking about murders of women, and it will come as a surprise to you that none of these articles actually had the word femicide in the title, and only 4 of these articles actually had the word femicide in their body of work. So if this is how the media is covering issues of femicide, it's not, no one actually knows that, you know what, this is a systemic problem that is here. If you're covering it in isolation, no one will know that. So when the media accurately represents the problem and succinctly states that, you know what, this is actually femicide and it's systemic violence against women, it will create awareness, and it will also show a connection to the broader issue of violence against women. And in so doing, it will also educate the public about these crimes and their broader societal implication. And in so doing, using the platforms they have, they can bring up, you see, most media houses usually have maybe panels after news in the morning. They can bring such panelists to speak about issues of femicide and what can be done to end this. Another thing that the media can do is reducing sensational and graphic reporting of femicide. I'm sure all of us have seen a media coverage of a story and just cringed at it, or just thought they didn't have to show all these graphic details. In most cases of maybe where women have been murdered, the media will show pictures and give very graphic information. And in so doing, they forget that, you know, the victim or the survivor was a mother to someone, was a sister, was a daughter, or was someone's friend. And in portraying, giving such narratives, they're hurting not only the victim, but also their family and their friends. So the media should really be sensitive with regard to how they portray such stories. Another thing that the media can do to prevent femicide is coming up with policies, having clear policies and guidelines on how matters of gender-based violence and femicide are reported. In the recent past, we've seen how insensitively and how badly some media personalities and media houses have covered stories. They've done so from a very patriarchal perspective or a very misogynistic perspective. And the incident that happened with Chaffee, we actually realized that, you know what, there are policies in place. Maybe what is happening is that these policies are not being followed. So these media houses should actually take time and sensitize their employees on how these stories are supposed to be presented, like the sensitive nature of these stories, and like maybe the reduction of sensationalization. Yeah, there are many more ways in which the media can prevent femicide, but those are just some of the few ways they can do so. Lauren.
Thank you. Sorry, I had not unmuted my mic. Sorry about that. Thank you so much, Edith. Elsie, we've talked about what we can do on an individual, on an institutional level. We've talked about what the media can do. So what can the people that are listening today, what can we do to end this thing?
I think to end femicide, one, it requires both prevention and response. Why? Because often, someone is not victimized once, but it happens a number of times. So again, you would find that in your prevention, in your response, then you're preventing. I hope that makes sense. But just, what I mentioned, having the conversation, sensitizations, but particularly when it comes to engaging the youth, it's important for, sensitization to be done. For instance, not just within 16 days. 16 days is just a highlight, of the plight that women face, and also kind of celebrating the volunteers, persons with disabilities, appreciating their strength and etc. So it cuts across a lot of sort of days. But in all those days, it's highlighting all these human rights issues and acknowledging that women's rights are human rights. But I think one thing would be, I know a lot of youth spend a lot of time on social media. So one would be, can we engage in Twitter chats? But also there's the live tweeting. Can we have meaningful conversations where we're not just talking about what is trending during that day? Can media stations adopt they have these trendy shows on Saturday or on Friday in the evening? Can we have conversations then with the youth? Because that is the huge sort of listenership, but also engaging the youth in a way that there are incentives and where they really like to participate. For instance, moot courts, where they're able to actually do research and able to bring out and basically just get more awareness around the issues. But it's also important, and I'd like to just note, how the youth were very instrumental in, the state's sort of address to sexual harassment in public spaces. I think it was around 2013. No, it couldn't. Yeah, maybe around 2013, 2014 there, when we had, young girls, young women being harassed in matatus, being stripped of their clothes, and even, a lot of sexual assault in that aspect, and a lot of the conversation then. And I think if you realize what happened at that time, one incident took place and then nothing was done. And I want to bring this to say that, punitive measures are preventative. So one incident happened, a lot of the conversation was from men, like, who told her to wear, short clothes. These narratives that we create that really are not an excuse, like I mentioned. So, and then now when the second, third incident happened, so you're letting this go by, and further, on social media and in spaces, the conversation is, shouldn't have worn, such a cloth. What was she doing at night at 11, coming from whatever party? All these excuses. And if you actually look at the movements, this movement was highly led by university students, and it was, it was joint. There wasn't. It was a joint effort to say, hey, it's the victims of this are actually our sisters in the school. And what happened was there was so much, movement, and all it took, Florence, for this to end was literally before even the policies, because from their policies came up, and that's the power of social movement. But even before that, just the, His Excellency being very bold and saying, hey, we will not allow this. And if caught, this is the punitive measure. And, that was it. So again, there's a lot of power in punitive measures. And I think this goes to what Onyango was talking about, yeah? That, we cannot keep excusing a lot of this on mental health. Yes, it's rooted because, violence is, hurt people. But at the same time, there's people who know that, hey, if I can get away with this, then I'm going to do it. So it's sort of like, it's important for us to have punitive measures and also create awareness around them, because they're also a way, to prevent. So that was one of the instances where the youth really came together, and that is the power of the youth. They're able to mobilize, and they have a lot of space and a lot of voice on social media. So using those spaces. And then I think someone mentioned this, it's important for, Onyango mentioned this in terms of inclusivity. Can we have youth in whatever spaces? And I think Kenya is one of those countries that is really progressive and that allows for, inclusivity of all persons, including youth. So to have youth representatives be able to, better voice that. So those are some of the things that can be done to prevent, but also how the youth can come in. And it's also important for, organizations such as CREW to engage, not just women rights organizations, all of them, all human rights organizations, depending on whatever you're fighting with, because this is a human rights issue. It's not a women's rights issue per se. So it's to say that, can we all engage the youth in these conversations? Because this is happening. And if left unchecked within schools, then these are the same people who would go outside and do the same thing. Why? Because there was no checks, there were no punishments, and etc. So working together, but also within the schools, can we have, how would I term this? I think it's important that within the curriculums and the sensitization, I think for me, I was shocked at this day and age, with the message that Cooperative University was, trying to put out, victim blaming, around clothes and etc. I did not expect that. And I think it just goes to show how we really do not have a deepened understanding of, GBV in general, and how, such kind of thinking, stereotypic thinking can lead to femicide. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Elsie, for that. That was quite insightful. I want you to prepare for the last question as we're coming to a close, just to explain what CREW does in terms of GBV and femicide in particular. As you prepare to answer that, I'd just like to thank everyone for actively engaging with us, for being with us throughout the 2 hours, almost 2 hours we've been here. I can see a very, very active chat. We can see Vincent from SGBV Awareness, CBO. We can see you, Catherine. Dennis from Uganda. It's really nice, to have people from all over in a very important discussion such as this. Akinyi, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. The panelists, please prepare your 2-minute parting shots. Elsie, over to you and explaining what CREW does and how we could get assistance.
Yeah, so basically, CREW is a women's rights organization. It's an NGO. And, our vision and mission, our vision is where we can see women and girls enjoy rights, similar to how men enjoy. And our mission is to expand and champion these rights. And one of those things, of course, is centered on, talking about what does CREW does as far as GBV. We do prevention as well. So a lot of awareness like this, taking into account the various, what they call the various complexities around, violence meted around persons with disabilities, the youth, the key populations, but also in terms of response, CREW does legal and psychosocial support. And recently, of course, providing safe space. So CREW is really keen on having, comprehensive services. But I think was it Balin or Edith that mentioned, having empowerment sort of programs. And this also is a preventative, because you'd find that most of these women that experience, for instance, IPV or even SGBV, sexual violence within their marriages or within their unions, because this happens actually quite a lot, you'd find them sort of saying, hey, I had no safe place to go to at that moment for me to be able to heal and just think about my life and think about the next step. But also I don't have the economic means to be able to, start off and start strong. So those are some of the services that CREW offers, but also CREW is very keen, like I mentioned, on, policy work and informing, sort of like the general policies and laws around GBV to ensure that survivors have, proper care and such. So we're actively involved with stakeholders, having conversations with them and providing that sort of guidance around what we know, given our expertise with working with survivors would actually, help them in a holistic manner. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Elsie, for that. Balin, we'll start with you, your parting shots, 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So my parting shot is, I just want to also echo what Elsie has said, that even though during the 16 days of activism, that's when like we're having discussions about GBV. It's actually supposed to be hard throughout the year, like every time, like whenever you're out with your friends, you know, it can be hard anywhere, so that we can normalize these conversations. Like, it's important to have these conversations to, you know, to curb the victim blaming, to take collective action on GBV, so that we can come together as a community and actually fight GBV together, rather than a group of people are the only ones that are working to fight against GBV. They need to, like, such conversations are the ones that are actually able to empower the youth to recognize and address and come up with ways to actually prevent GBV. The youth are a key stakeholder because they're the future of tomorrow. So the conversations we have today, as we grow up, as we continue to grow up, we continue to have such values with us, that, you know, we recognize that GBV is bad. Like, how can we stop GBV? How can we, if someone is experiencing GBV, how can we help them? Like, are we creating more safe places for people to come and report GBV, and also they feel welcomed? Like, I'm hoping that there's a day that we'll reach a day that people, like victims, are able to speak out about their problems and not be victim blamed for what they have experienced. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Balin, for that. Edith, your parting shot, please.
Thank you, Florence. I'd just like to say I'm very happy and very glad to be part of this generation that is normalizing these discussions about gender-based violence, about femicide and all this. Actually normalizing these discussions and having constructive discussions about how to end gender-based violence is very important, especially during this time when incidents of violence against women have really risen. Therefore, in speaking out, we are actually solving the problem. And also, I'm very happy that we are talking about creating safe spaces for these women, because these women cannot actually speak out if there are no safe spaces. And I'm glad for organizations such as CREW and all other organizations that are doing this work. And just something else for maybe the people who are listening today, as Elsie has said, CREW has all these facilities. They've created a safe space where women and girls who've undergone maybe gender-based violence can be heard. And I'm encouraging all the young girls out there not to be scared to speak out, because there are people out here who actually care and that can give you help. Yes.
Thank you so much, Edith, for that. Mr. Onyango, please give us your parting shot. You can plug yourself as well. Guys, please follow him. He has very educative conversations, particularly on Twitter, where I personally follow him. So please feel free to follow us, follow our Twitter page. But Mr. Onyango, over to you.
Actually, my parting shot is just going to be 2 words. It's time. It's time. It's time. You can follow me on Instagram on @RixPoet, which is RIXPOET. The same for Twitter, RixPoet. I really like having uncomfortable conversations around masculinity and gender. I consider myself a cultural designer because I feel nobody is going to come from a different place to design cultures for us that are going to work for us. We are the ones who have to go to work. So we have to all be cultural designers to create progress that will see us live healthy lives. So Onyango Otieno on Facebook, I actually operate a safe space for sexually abused boys and men, and a 200-member mental health support group as well. I hold workshops on masculinity to groups and organizations. So if you're looking to learn more about that in your workplace, at home, anywhere you are, you can just reach out to me. I also have digital training advocacy, digital advocacy trainings. I also do digital advocacy trainings. This is for social, especially like specifically for social justice organizations when they have campaigns, either when they have campaigns and they need somebody to help them with their strategy, or they are training people on how to use digital media for advocacy. I do that work. And I am a trauma coach, so I offer trauma healing services to individuals and groups as well. My mantra in life really is about connection. I like people connecting to themselves so that they can connect with other people. I really believe in the power of collective, people coming together for a collective purpose. Because if we start doing that for our healing, we are going to heal so many children in this country. And those children right now are us guys who masquerade as adults, but we are stuck in our childhood in so many things. So thank you very much for inviting me to this webinar. I am always grateful for crew for reaching out to me when they are doing this similar. I would want to actually work more with you guys. So actually I would love to have a conversation with you after you're done with logistics and everything, because I know it takes time. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Onyango. That's well noted. Elsie will contact you. Elsie, over to you. You can give us your final parting shot. Thank you so much.
I think for me, I would want to particularly send this message to the youth that let's be he for she's, let's emulate, Onyango Otieno, let's find safe spaces where, young men can be able to have these conversations, in such manners. But also just to say that what we're saying is maybe is not consent. The only consent that is there is yes. If I'm drunk, it's not a consent. Whether I'm high, lit, whatever way you want to call it, that does not amount to consent. So we really need to be careful because there's no gray area as far as consent is concerned. It's either black or white. Just to mention that actually all the services that Crew offers are on pro bono services, so do not hesitate to reach out. Our toll-free number, I'll also leave it on the chat, but it's 0800 720 186. Let me just leave it on the chat. Yes, 0800 720 186. So do not hesitate to reach out, even if just for legal advice, psychosocial support, and shelter support as well. Yes, and if you'd also like to know more about Crew, what we're doing, our programs, what we're doing around 16 days, kindly feel free to reach out. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you so much. Elsie, I believe you can see the number on the screen as well. So, yes. Thank you, Dennis, for that, working behind the scenes. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. It's been I've learned more than expected to learn. I think I wasn't ready for the conversation only because I think my mind has been opened up more to really understand what the issue is, and particularly in higher learning institutions. The discussions we've had today are a clear depiction of just how bad femicide is among the youth. You begin to talk about Berlin, Veblin, Pauline, Ivy, Sharon, Agnes. May their souls rest in peace. These are all names of women who are brutally taken away. Their dreams were cut short at the hands of men. The above names are names of mothers, sisters, aunties, cousins, daughters, nieces, and above all, humans who are mercilessly taken away from their families. We should never tire to stand up and speak up against gender-based violence. It's important to note that being silent, we become complicit and we create a world full of violations of human rights for everyone. So I think it's important to note here that when you remain silent, you help the aggressor. So I'm never the person who's being oppressed. So it's important to continue speaking about these issues. We continue to urge you to continue to, during the 16 days of activism, talk about GBV and spread the awareness on Twitter. Feel free to tag us and to tag Crew Kenya. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining this conversation, and we look forward to more engagements Thank you, Elsie. Thank you, Mr. Onyango. Thank you, Edith and Berlin. Thank you for the team behind. And thank you so much for our development partners who made this webinar possible. Thanks, guys. And looking forward to seeing you in future.